Hey guys, this is Writing with Miss Ash, lesson number 1. We're going to go super easy today. So I will always have these videos up on YouTube, hopefully before we actually have our talk. So if you wanted to be prepped ahead of time, or if you can't wait, or you miss it. So I'll always have these up there, and it'll be basically what I'm just going to go over in our quote-unquote class. So we're starting super easy today with something that probably everybody already knows about, which is called Freytag's pyramid, which is basically just basic plot structures. So this is our original pyramid, okay? So way back, Aristotle actually came up with the idea of breaking a story down into basic parts, or at least he was the first person to really write about it that we know of, in Poetics. And then in like mid 1800s, there's a German playwright named Freytag who kind of made his own version of that concept, and he called it Freytag's pyramid. So this is the old school version of it. We did modernize a lot of it because his pyramid was written basically for tragedies, because that's what he liked to write, like Shakespearean type tragedies. So the beginning part is the same. So in basic plot structure, in the beginning of your story, you have like the introduction, and then you have the exciting force. And the exciting force is basically what kickstarts the plot, what introduces the conflict, and what drives the story forward. So this would be like if you're looking at the hero's journey, if you're familiar with that, this is what, this is like the herald, basically. So the rising movement is how the story is developing, how the plot is developing, introducing new characters. The hero might leave home and do something elsewhere. And so you have like introduction of new locations, and all of that goes into the rising movement until you hit the climax. So with Freytag, the climax is smack dab in the middle of the story, okay, which is not how we do it today. And for Freytag, what he considered the climax to be was the turning point, or like the role reversal. So I can get it into markup and things not screw up. Am I still recording? Yep. Okay. So for Freytag's pyramid, you have this part of the story is like the main story, and then this part of the story is basically the mirror version of the first part of the story. All right, meaning that things happen oppositely. So in a tragedy, you will set up the main character to be great, and everything's going great, and they kind of get cocky because everything's going great, and then they make these decisions, and then the climax happens, and then after the climax, all of these decisions kind of bite them in the ass, and then it's just one damn thing after another, one fuck up after another, until you get to the ending, in which people die most of the time. If you're doing like a Shakespearean type comedy, especially like comedy of errors where like people screw up but it's funny, then like this is where all the screw ups happen, is the beginning, and then you hit the climax, and then down here on the opposite end is where things start looking up, things start getting better. If you have like miscommunication errors in the beginning of the story, those clear up, people start being honest, the truth comes out, that type of thing. So, for Freytag, the climax was always not necessarily like the most suspenseful part of the story, but the story where things are shifting. So everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people consider Dragon Age 2 to be in like a classic tragedy structure. And it does kind of fit this plot diagram where like you have, Hawke gets introduced, they go to Kirkwall, meet Varric and the crew, get money, get their family name back and their fancy big house, and they start relationships with whatever love interest you want, and like things aren't that bad, and then you hit the climax. And I would consider maybe the climax being the fight with the air shock. Okay, so after the fight with the air shock, Hawk is like on top of the world. They're the champion of Kirkwall, and everyone loves them, and they have a great reputation now, and everything's great, and everything's wonderful. And then everything goes to shit after that. And it just keeps getting shittier and keeps getting shittier. And you've got all these horrible things that just keep happening until you get to the catastrophe. So Freytag considered the catastrophe to be like the culmination of all the heroes' mistakes, especially in this area here where they were like super arrogant and they were making decisions and getting cocky, and then they get caught by their own pride. Alright, so of course Dragon Age 2's catastrophe would be Anders blowing up the Chantry, which led to Meredith going completely batshit crazy and then trying to get all the mages killed, which leads into Inquisition. And so it's like the ultimate culmination of all the things that have gone wrong in Kirkwall, and all the things that were fucked up in Kirkwall finally blow up. And Hawk, whether Hawk would have supported or not supported Anders, they didn't know, and so that is kind of their mistake, that they like knew this guy for years and didn't really see the warning signs, so to speak. So that's how like you have like a basic plot structure for tragedy, but we aren't really that crazy about tragedy anymore, so we kind of modernized it. So we go over here. This Freytag's pyramid is like the kind that you would probably have seen in school. A lot of the times it's called like a witch's hat because it's not a perfect pyramid anymore. The climax is no longer in the middle of the story. It's mostly close to the end of the story. And so most of the plot is going to be rising action. So you have your exposition down here at the bottom, and that is your introduction to the character in the world. The inciting incident at the star is the conflict, how the conflict starts, and then everything builds with the conflict and introducing more characters, and the hero tries to solve the conflict and, can't quite solve it for whatever reason, or things get worse, and everything just builds and builds and builds for better or worse right up to the climax. Okay, and the climax in this version is like the most suspenseful, tense part of the story that is the culmination of everything that built up to it. So if we're looking at Inquisition, the climax would be the fight with Corypheus. Okay, and the rising action is all of the shit that we had to do to get to that fight with him. So the rising action is the vast majority of the story. Then you hit the climax. And then the falling action, instead of like a reversal of fortune, the falling action is basically just tying up our loose ends, resolving any of the smaller conflicts until you get to the resolution, which is how are things ending? What's the ending? How are things over? And that is our basic structure for that we're a lot more familiar with. So fan fiction is interesting because most stories, conflicts that aren't fan fiction have a lot of like external conflicts, meaning conflicts that are coming from the world and the systems and other people. And fan fiction, I think, deals a lot with internal or like emotional or mental like conflicts. And so our stories aren't really like the entire way through the plot structure unless you're doing like a long fic. And then our stories are mostly focused on conflict that you don't really see or notice. It's not as obvious because it's all internal. But even something like Coffee Shop AU can still follow Freytag's pyramid. But the conflict is just, are they going to get together and like finally admit that they like each other? It's still a conflict though. What I like to use Freytag's pyramid for is to not look at like my overall story in the pyramid, but use this pyramid over and over and over again within chapters or scenes. So with your scene, you have to set up the exposition of like where in the story's timeline does the scene take place and where in the story does it take place. And then something is always happening. There's always like miniature conflicts within every scene of a character wants something and can't get it, or something needs to happen and something is preventing that from happening. And it could be something really, really small and like not that big a deal, like a character like, I don't know, loses their watch or something, and they're like having a scene where they interrogate another character and see if they saw the watch. All right. that can still have exposition, inciting incident, rising action of interrogating that character. Have you seen my watch? I'm freaking out, man. My grandfather gave it to me, whatever. Climax would be whether that character did or did not see the watch, and then the following action would be what the character, like the main character, is deciding to do next, and then resolution would be them enacting that plan. So maybe character A lost the watch, character B said, hey, I didn't see it, but I heard something loud clunking in the washing machine downstairs when you put your clothes in. So then character A freaks the fuck out, runs down into the washing machine. Resolution would be they find their watch. Okay, so if you kind of keep in mind like little miniature versions of this pyramid within your scenes, or like really short fix or one shots, it really keeps the plot going. It keeps the reader invested, and it doesn't feel like stagnant. So if you're really stuck on a scene and you're like, I have no idea what's going on, you need to make sure that there's like some kind of like minor conflict where the character, needs something. So like a good way to do this is if a character lost their watch, like the boring way to do this would be character A, inciting incident, can't find their watch. Rising action, goes and finds character B, freaks out, where's my watch? Then the climax would be character B being like, oh, it's right here. I found it and saved it from the washing machine. And it's like, the conflict wasn't really a conflict at that point, And so the reader's like, okay, well, I guess I was scared for a hot second, but it wasn't really a big deal. Okay, so to make your scenes more like interesting or suspenseful or riveting or whatever, even for silly conflicts like a watch in a washing machine, like make the conflict like a bigger issue than just resolving it as quickly as possible. So that is all that I have for today, and then we can talk about this all week. I'm kind of interested because I'm coming at this at an angle of original fiction, because that's how I learned how to write. And then I did fan fiction later. So, some of this stuff will have to be tweaked or changed or thought of in a different way, because fan fiction is not really the same rules or has the same vibe as like original fiction. So, all right, I'll see you guys later.